2025, April 8, Tuesday. Trade war intensifies. China takes retaliatory steps against U.S. tariffs, extra budget, elaborated strategies needed. China will impose a reciprocal 34% tariff on all imports from the U.S. from April 10. It also placed export restrictions on rare earth elements. These moves are being made in retaliation for U.S. tariffs on all Chinese goods imported into the U.S. Then U.S. President Donald Trump said China has been hit much harder than the USA, and told Americans to hang tough, though it won't be easy. China and the U.S. are the two biggest export markets of South Korea. If their trade war is prolonged, Korea's economy will suffer greatly. U.S. reciprocal tariffs on many countries are much steeper than expected. Under an executive order signed by Trump, a 25% reciprocal tariff on South Korea products imported into the U.S. will become effective on April 9. This practically neutralized the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, which went into effect in 2012. The U.S. levied a 34% tariff on China and a 46% tariff on Vietnam. China and Vietnam are countries that South Korean companies utilize as their production bases. Exports to the U.S. through the countries will decrease. If Chinese goods are released into markets other than the U.S. due to the tariff barrier, South Korea will face a steep Chinese competition in the market. South Korea's real gross domestic product grew a slight 0.066% in the first quarter of last year from the previous quarter. According to the Bank of Korea, the country's growth ranked 29th among 37 countries. 36 members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and China. J.P. Morgan Chase said Saturday it expects real U.S. GDP to contract to minus 0.3% from its previous estimate of 1.3% due to the likely impact of tariffs announced by the Trump administration. U.S. recession could undermine South Korea's exports. Some economists predict a negative growth of South Korea in the first quarter. For Korea, it would be difficult to make retaliatory responses like China and the European Union. The country cannot but attempt to negotiate with the Trump government. Regrettably, it is not as ready to respond as other nations due to the political turmoil. The president was impeached and the consequential presidential election will be held on June 3rd, yet it cannot sit still bound by political issues. Summit contact would be difficult due to leadership void until the presidential election, but on the working level, meticulous preparations should be made. Seoul should persuade the Trump administration with concrete data and convincing justification showing that South Korea contributes to the U.S. economy. It needs to drive home that the reciprocal tariff on South Korea is unbalanced in many respects. The rate is the highest among those countries which have free trade agreements with the U.S. South Korea was the largest foreign direct investor in the U.S., committing $21.5 billion last year. Korea should refute U.S. misunderstandings and policies about South Korean non-tariff barriers. In 2024, Korea's effective tariff rate for goods imported from the U.S. was 0.79%, thanks to the free trade agreement, but the Trump administration claimed it was 50%. The assumption is difficult to understand. It is seriously lopsided to levy a tariff of just 0.79% on goods imported from the U.S., while a 25% tariff is charged on Korean goods imported into the U.S. The U.S. is set to hope for Korea's cooperation in the fields of shipbuilding and energy. This could be a good bargaining chip for Seoul. Late last month, the Korean government said it would push for a new 10 trillion won, $6.8 billion supplementary budget to recover from wildfire damage and stimulate domestic demand. Support for exporters to the U.S. should be expanded in the budget. An extra budget is the best possible way to cope quickly with the dire economic situation. Legislators should pass the supplementary budget bill as soon as possible. They should not neglect economic and trade issues to focus on the presidential election.